There are places on this planet that simply don't make sense. Structures that stand where no tools should have built them. Carvings older than the languages we speak. Footprints left in stone that predate what we even call history. Across mountains, beneath jungles, and far below the oceans, we keep uncovering pieces of something that shouldn't exist. These aren't stories, they're real, cataloged by scientists, photographed, measured, and still utterly unexplained. If that kind of mystery stirs something in you, you're not alone. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a like to support this journey into the unknown, and comment below what time is it for you right now and where are you watching from. Now take a breath, settle in, because tonight we follow the faint trail of something ancient, something almost forgotten, and maybe not entirely human. The Newgrange Passage tomb in Ireland appears to be just another grassy hill from the outside, but for exactly 17 minutes each year, on the winter solstice, something extraordinary happens. A beam of sunlight travels down a narrow passage and illuminates the inner chamber with surgical precision. This wasn't an accident. Someone 5,000 years ago engineered this moment with mathematical accuracy that rivals modern astronomy. The structure predates Stonehenge by centuries. It predates the pyramids, yet whoever built it understood celestial mechanics so perfectly that their calculation still works today, thousands of years later, without deviation. They created a stone computer that tracks the movement of the Earth around the sun with an accuracy that wouldn't be matched again until the age of modern science. But here's what unsettles researchers the most. The passage is too narrow for the builders to have seen the alignment from inside while they were constructing it. They had to know, with absolute certainty, where that beam of light would fall before they ever laid the first stone. They were working from a blueprint that required knowledge we didn't think existed in the ancient world. The chamber itself defies explanation. The corbelled ceiling has stood for 5 millennia without a single stone falling. No mortar was used. The massive stones fit together with such precision that the chamber remains watertight to this day. Some of the stones weigh over 10 tons, yet they were positioned with tolerances measured in millimeters. The most unsettling detail isn't the engineering, it's the silence. Unlike other ancient sites, Newgrange contains no inscriptions, no hieroglyphs, no record of who built it or why. The builders left no signature, no boast of their achievement. They simply vanished into history, leaving behind only this silent testament to their impossible knowledge. Carbon dating places the construction at around 3200 BCE, making it older than the written word in most of the world. This means the builders had no way to record their techniques, no way to pass down their knowledge except through direct teaching. Yet the precision of their work suggests they had access to mathematical concepts that wouldn't be formally discovered for thousands of years. The spiral carvings found throughout the site are equally mysterious. These aren't random decorations, they follow mathematical patterns that appear in nature, in galaxies, in the structure of DNA. The builders were documenting something fundamental about the universe itself, encoding it in stone in a language we're only beginning to understand. Some researchers believe Newgrange was part of a larger network of monuments, all aligned to different celestial events. Similar structures exist across Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, all built with the same impossible precision, all dating to the same mysterious period. It's as if an entire civilization dedicated itself to tracking the heavens, then disappeared without explanation. The site's acoustic properties add another layer of mystery. The chamber amplifies certain frequencies while dampening others. Researchers have discovered that the human voice resonates at specific pitches inside the chamber, creating an almost otherworldly effect. Some believe this was intentional, that the builders understood not just astronomy and engineering, but the physics of sound itself. What makes Newgrange truly unsettling isn't just what it represents, but what it suggests about our understanding of the past. We are taught that human civilization progressed in a straight line, that knowledge accumulated gradually over time. But sites like Newgrange hint at something different. They suggest that advanced knowledge existed in the ancient world, was lost, and had to be rediscovered. The builders of Newgrange possessed knowledge that spans multiple disciplines. They were astronomers, mathematicians, engineers, and acousticians. They understood the movement of celestial bodies, the properties of sound, the behavior of light, and the engineering principles needed to create structures that would last millennia. This wasn't primitive technology, this was science. Local folklore speaks of the site as a gateway, a place where the boundaries between worlds grow thin. On the winter solstice, when that beam of light penetrates the darkness, people report strange sensations. Some describe feeling watched, others speak of hearing voices that aren't there. The scientific community dismisses these accounts, but the reports persist, year after year, from visitors who had no prior knowledge of the stories. The mystery deepens when you consider the effort required to build Newgrange. The white quartz stones that form the outer wall were quarried from locations over 50 miles away. The massive roof stones came from mountains 30 miles distant. This wasn't a local project. It required organization, planning, and resources on a scale that challenges our understanding of Neolithic society. Yet for all its complexity, Newgrange serves a singular purpose. It tracks one moment in time, one alignment of Earth and Sun that occurs once each year. The builders invested generations of work to capture 17 minutes of sunlight. This suggests the moment held significance we can't comprehend, that the winter solstice meant something to them that goes beyond our modern understanding. The site remained hidden for thousands of years, buried under earth and vegetation, forgotten by history. It was only rediscovered in the 1960s when archaeologists began to uncover the true scope of the structure. The fact that it survived intact and functional through millennia of neglect speaks to the skill of its builders. They didn't just create a monument, they created something eternal. As you stand in that chamber on the winter solstice, watching that beam of light creep across the floor, you're witnessing the execution of a plan laid down 5,000 years ago. The builders may be gone, their names forgotten, their civilization lost to time, but their knowledge lives on. Every year, their calculations prove correct. Every year, the light returns exactly as they intended. Newgrange reminds us that the past holds secrets we're only beginning to understand. It challenges our assumptions about ancient capabilities and suggests that knowledge, once lost, can take millennia to recover. The builders of Newgrange knew something we forgot, understood something we're still trying to grasp. The mystery of Newgrange isn't just about the past, it's about the future. If advanced knowledge existed in the ancient world, What else might be waiting to be rediscovered? What other secrets lie buried beneath the earth, encoded in stone, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? The stone circles of Nabta Playa in Egypt's Sahara Desert tell a similar story. These standing stones, arranged in precise astronomical alignments, predate Stonehenge by over 1,000 years. They were built in what is now one of the most inhospitable places on Earth, yet they demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics that rivals modern astronomy. The builders of Nabta Playa tracked the movement of stars with such precision that they could predict the flooding of the Nile hundreds of miles away. They understood the relationship between celestial events and earthly phenomena, knowledge that allowed them to thrive in a harsh environment. Yet, like the builders of Newgrange, they left no record of who they were or how they acquired such knowledge. The stones themselves are arranged in patterns that mirror the night sky. The builders created a terrestrial map of the heavens, a three-dimensional calendar that tracked the movement of stars over thousands of years. This wasn't simple observation. This was sophisticated astronomy, requiring mathematical concepts that wouldn't be formally developed until the classical period. What's most disturbing about sites like Nabta Playa is their age. They were built during a period when mainstream archaeology tells us humans were just beginning to develop agriculture. Yet the knowledge demonstrated in these constructions suggests a level of scientific understanding that challenges our entire timeline of human development. The precision of these ancient astronomical sites raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of knowledge itself. How do entire civilizations acquire such sophisticated understanding of the cosmos? How do they develop the mathematical frameworks necessary to encode this knowledge in stone? And perhaps most importantly, how does such knowledge disappear so completely that it takes millennia to rediscover? These questions become more pressing when you consider that similar sites exist across the globe. From the Americas to Asia, from Europe to Africa, ancient peoples were building monuments that demonstrate identical astronomical knowledge. They were tracking the same celestial events, using the same mathematical principles, achieving the same impossible precision. The global distribution of these sites suggests either contact between ancient civilizations that mainstream history says never occurred, or the independent development of identical knowledge systems across cultures that had no contact with each other. Both possibilities challenge our understanding of the ancient world. The mystery deepens when you examine the effort required to create these monuments. The builders invested generations of work, moving massive stones across vast distances, shaping them with tools that supposedly didn't exist, positioning them with precision that modern technology struggles to match. This wasn't casual stargazing. This was systematic, scientific observation on a scale that suggests astronomy was the primary concern of entire civilizations. Yet for all their sophistication, these sites remain silent about their creators. They tell us nothing about the people who built them, the society that supported them, or the knowledge system that made them possible. They exist as monuments to forgotten wisdom, reminders of capabilities we're only beginning to understand. The silence of these sites is perhaps their most mysterious feature. Unlike the monuments of later civilizations, they contain no inscriptions, no artwork, no records of their creators. They were built by people who either chose not to leave their names or who communicated in ways we can't recognize. They exist outside the normal flow of human history, orphaned artifacts of a forgotten age. As we continue to study these ancient astronomical sites, we're forced to confront the possibility that our understanding of the past is incomplete. The builders of Newgrange, Nabta Playa, and countless other sites possessed a knowledge that challenges our assumptions about ancient capabilities. They were scientists, mathematicians, and engineers whose achievements rival our own. The mystery of these ancient astronomers isn't just about the past, it's about the present. If such knowledge existed in the ancient world, what else might we have forgotten? What other secrets lie buried in the archaeological record, waiting to be discovered? And perhaps most importantly, what does this tell us about the nature of human knowledge itself? The stones remain silent and enigmatic, tracking the movement of celestial bodies with the same precision they've maintained for millennia. They continue to function exactly as their builders intended, proof that some forms of knowledge transcend time. In their silence, they speak volumes about the mysteries that still surround us, the questions that remain unanswered, and the secrets that may never be fully revealed. Beyond the silent monuments and carved stone mysteries we've explored, there are places on Earth where the very fabric of reality seems to bend, where ancient hands left behind not just structures, but warnings. These are the sites that make archaeologists nervous, the discoveries that get quietly filed away, the artifacts that challenge not just our understanding of the past, but our assumptions about what's possible. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, where the canopy is so thick that satellites can barely penetrate, lies a series of perfectly circular clearings that have existed for thousands of years. The locals call them the listening places, and they avoid them completely. Not because they're dangerous in any conventional sense, but because of what happens when you stand in their center. The clearings were first documented by a Portuguese expedition in 1743, though their records were largely dismissed as the fevered hallucinations of men driven mad by jungle sickness. But the clearings are real, and they're not natural. Each one is exactly 127 meters in diameter, cut with mathematical precision through dense jungle that should have reclaimed them centuries ago. The soil within each clearing is different too, darker, richer, but nothing grows there. Not weeds, not moss, not even bacteria according to modern soil analysis. What makes these clearings truly unsettling is the acoustic phenomenon that occurs within them. Stand in the exact center of any of these circles and speak in a normal voice, and your words will echo back to you, but not immediately. The echo returns exactly 7 seconds later, regardless of what you say or how you say it. This shouldn't be possible. Sound doesn't behave this way in open air, especially not in a jungle setting where trees and vegetation should absorb and scatter acoustic waves. In 1967, a team of acoustic engineers from the University of Sao Paulo attempted to study the phenomenon. They brought sophisticated recording equipment, measured the clearings from every angle, and conducted dozens of tests. What they found defied explanation. The 7-second delay was consistent across all the clearings they tested, but there was no physical structure to create such an echo. No cliff faces, no underground chambers, no architectural features that could bounce sound waves back with such precision. Even stranger, the echo wasn't just a reflection of the original sound. Spectral analysis revealed that the returned audio contained frequencies that weren't present in the original recording, harmonics that shouldn't exist, overtones that seemed to emerge from nowhere. One researcher described it as though something was responding to their voices, not just reflecting them. The indigenous people of the region have known about these clearings for generations, but they speak of them only in whispers. According to their oral traditions, these are places where the boundary between worlds grows thin, where the voices of the ancestors can still be heard if you know how to listen. They say that long ago, before the time of memory, sky people came down to these clearings to speak with the first humans, and that the circles still hold the echo of those ancient conversations. Modern attempts to study the clearings have been limited and largely unsuccessful. The Brazilian government has restricted access to most of the sites, citing environmental protection concerns. The few researchers who have been granted permission report equipment failures, navigation difficulties, and a pervasive sense of unease that grows stronger the longer they remain in the clearings. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of these listening places is what happens when you try to record the 7-second echo. Digital equipment fails. Analog tape recorders produce only static. Even simple voice recorders malfunction within the clearings. It's as if something actively prevents the preservation of whatever is happening there, ensuring that the phenomenon remains ephemeral, witnessed only by those brave enough to stand in the center and speak into the waiting silence. Local legends speak of people who ventured into the clearings during certain phases of the moon and never returned, not because they were harmed, but because they heard something in that 7-second delay that changed them, something that made them realize they no longer belonged in the world of the living. These stories might be dismissed as folklore, but search and rescue records from the region show an unusually high number of missing persons reports associated with the areas surrounding these clearings. The mystery deepens when you consider that similar circular clearings have been reported in other parts of the world. In the Congo Basin, in the mountains of Papua New Guinea, in the remote forests of Siberia. Always the same diameter, always with the same acoustic properties, always avoided by local populations who speak of them in hushed, fearful tones. What were these places originally designed for? Were they communication devices, some kind of ancient technology that allowed long-distance conversation across vast jungle distances? Were they religious sites, places of pilgrimage where people came to commune with forces beyond human understanding? Or were they something else entirely, markers or beacons left by a civilization that understood sound and acoustics in ways we're only beginning to comprehend? The 7-second delay suggests purpose, not accident, that precise timing, consistent across multiple sites, separated by thousands of miles, points to deliberate engineering. But engineering by whom and for what purpose? The fact that these clearings have remained unchanged for centuries, that they resist both natural reclamation and human documentation, suggests they were built to last far beyond the civilization that created them. In the end, the listening places of the Amazon remain one of archaeology's most haunting mysteries. They offer no artifacts to study, no written records to decipher, no physical evidence beyond the clearings themselves. They exist in the space between the known and the unknowable, challenging our understanding of what our ancestors were capable of and what they might have been trying to tell us across the centuries. Perhaps that's the point. Perhaps these aren't monuments to the past, but messages for the future, waiting for us to develop the wisdom to understand what they're really saying. Until then, they remain silent sentinels in the jungle, holding their secrets close, echoing back our voices with knowledge we're not yet ready to receive. And in that 7-second delay, in that moment between speaking and hearing, lies a truth that might be too profound for words. The listening places aren't just echoing our voices, they're echoing our questions back to us, asking us to consider not just what we're saying, but what we're really listening for in the silence between worlds. The map that shows continents that don't exist, the chart that predicts tomorrow's weather with impossible accuracy, and the device that translates languages that were never spoken. We've journeyed through stones that remember ancient footsteps, chambers that silence the world, and mechanisms that operate outside the boundaries of time itself. But now we turn to mysteries that challenge not just our understanding of the past, but our grasp of reality itself. Deep in the archives of the Vatican, locked away from public view, lies a collection of documents that don't fit into any historical timeline. Maps drawn on parchment that show coastlines of continents that have never existed. Star charts that plot the movements of celestial bodies not found in our solar system. And most disturbing of all, detailed accounts of events that happened yesterday, written in manuscripts that carbon dating places at over 1,000 years old. These aren't forgeries. They aren't mistakes. They're impossibilities that exist in physical form, cataloged and stored in climate-controlled vaults, defying every law of causality we understand. The Vatican calls them the Temporal Codex, and they represent perhaps the most unsettling mystery in human history, not because they're ancient, but because they're future. The first of these documents was discovered in 1952 during routine restoration work on damaged texts from the medieval period. A monk named Brother Francis was carefully separating pages that had been fused together by centuries of moisture when he found something that made him stop breathing. Sandwiched between 2 pages of a 12th century prayer book was a single sheet of parchment containing what appeared to be a detailed weather forecast for the week of March 15th through March 22nd, 1952. The forecast was written in Latin, in the same medieval script as the surrounding pages, using the same ink composition, but it accurately predicted a severe thunderstorm that would hit Rome on March the 18th, followed by 3 days of unusually warm weather, and then a sudden temperature drop on March 22nd. Brother Francis checked the date. It was March 14th, 1952. The next day, every detail of the forecast came true. That single page opened a door to something far larger. Over the following decades, researchers quietly combing through the Vatican's vast manuscript collection began finding similar anomalies. Maps that showed the exact layout of cities that wouldn't be built for centuries, technical diagrams for machines that wouldn't be invented until the Industrial Revolution, and most chillingly, historical accounts of events that were happening in real time, written in scripts that predated those events by hundreds of years. One particular manuscript, known only by its catalog number, 7749, contains what appears to be a complete account of World War II, written in 14th century Italian. The document describes great metal birds that rain fire from the skies and a terrible weapon that splits the very atom. It names specific battles, dates, and even includes rough sketches of tanks and aircraft. The parchment has been tested repeatedly. The ink, the binding, the aging patterns all confirm its medieval origin. But it's not just historical events. Some of the documents appear to be instruction manuals for technologies that don't exist yet. One manuscript describes a method for speaking across vast distances without wire or sound, complete with diagrams that eerily resemble modern satellite communication systems. Another contains detailed botanical illustrations of plants that weren't discovered until the 20th century, growing in regions they had never been found. The most unsettling discovery came in 1978 when a researcher found a collection of documents that appeared to be personal correspondence between medieval scribes and people from the future. The letters are written in a mixture of Latin and what appears to be modern English, as if two people separated by centuries were somehow able to communicate directly. One letter, dated 1347, contains a desperate plea from a monk asking for help dealing with the great pestilence that was sweeping across Europe. The response, written in modern English but on medieval parchment, provides detailed instructions for creating a primitive form of penicillin. These documents don't just predict the future, they seem to interact with it. In several cases, researchers have found what appear to be corrections or updates to earlier predictions, as if someone in the past was receiving real-time information about changing events. One astronomical chart shows the predicted path of a comet, then includes marginal notes in the same medieval hand, correcting the trajectory based on new observations from the watchers. The Vatican's official position is silence. When pressed, church officials describe the documents as scribal curiosities or misattributed texts. But internal memos, leaked in the 1990s, tell a different story. One memo, written by a senior cardinal, describes the documents as evidence of divine providence and recommends that they be studied by theologians specializing in prophetic literature. Another memo, marked with the highest security classification, simply states, "These documents must never be publicly acknowledged. The implications are too dangerous." What makes the temporal codex even more mysterious is how it seems to be growing. New documents appear in the archives periodically, often discovered in places that have been thoroughly searched before. Some researchers believe the collection is somehow expanding itself, adding new pages as future events unfold. Others think that the documents exist in a state of temporal flux, appearing and disappearing as the timeline shifts. There are theories, of course. Some suggest that the documents are evidence of time travel, that future humans have somehow found a way to send information back through time. Others propose that they're the work of prophets or mystics who possessed genuine precognitive abilities. A few fringe researchers have suggested that the documents come from a parallel dimension where time flows differently, occasionally intersecting with our own timeline. But perhaps the most disturbing theory is that the documents represent a kind of temporal archaeology, that somewhere in the past, a civilization or group of individuals discovered how to peer forward through time, documenting what they saw for future generations. If true, it would mean that human understanding of time and causality was far more advanced in the medieval period than we've ever imagined. The most recent addition to the collection was discovered in 2019, though this information has never been officially confirmed. According to leaked reports, the document appears to be a detailed account of a global pandemic written in 15th century script, but describing events that began in 2020. The manuscript allegedly includes information about lockdowns, vaccine development, and social changes that wouldn't occur until the pandemic had been ongoing for months. What's most chilling about the temporal codex is not just that it exists, but what it implies about the nature of time itself. If the past can somehow document the future, then our understanding of cause and effect may be fundamentally flawed. Time might not be the linear progression we experience, but something far more complex and interconnected. The Vatican continues to restrict access to these documents, and most researchers who have studied them have been sworn to secrecy. But occasionally, fragments of information leak out, whispered in academic circles or shared in encrypted communications between trusted colleagues. And what they describe is a collection of documents that shouldn't exist, containing knowledge that couldn't be known, written by people who somehow saw across the centuries to witness events they would never live to see. The Temporal Codex remains one of the most carefully guarded secrets in human history, not because it threatens national security or religious doctrine, but because it challenges something even more fundamental: our basic understanding of reality itself. In a world where we assume the past is fixed and the future is unknown, these documents suggest that time might be far more fluid and interconnected than we've ever dared to imagine. The crystal that broadcasts voices from the past, found in a cave system beneath the Sahara Desert, where the walls themselves seem to remember every word ever spoken in their presence. It began as a routine geological survey in 1994, mapping underground water sources in the Western Sahara. The team was using ground-penetrating radar when they detected a large hollow space approximately 40 meters below the surface. What they found when they descended wasn't just a cave, but a chamber that seemed to violate the laws of physics. The walls were lined with crystal formations, unlike anything in the geological record. These weren't the familiar quartz or calcite formations found in most caves, but something that appeared to be artificially grown, with perfectly symmetrical structures that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. But it was when the team set up their equipment that they noticed something truly extraordinary. The crystals were emitting sound, not random noise, but voices. Human voices, speaking in languages some living, some dead, some completely unrecognizable. The voices weren't coming from any external source. They seemed to be generated by the crystals themselves, as if the mineral formations were somehow playing back conversations that had occurred in the chamber over thousands of years. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geologist from the University of Cairo, was the first to document the phenomenon systematically. Using sensitive audio equipment, she began recording and analyzing the voices. What she discovered was that the crystals weren't just producing random speech, but seemed to be playing back actual conversations in chronological order. The most recent voices spoke Arabic and French, languages that had been introduced to the region in recorded history. But as the team listened longer, the voices began speaking in older tongues, languages that hadn't been heard in centuries. The crystals appeared to be natural recording devices, somehow capturing and storing acoustic information over vast periods of time. But this wasn't just sound playback. The conversations were complete, with multiple voices interacting, asking questions, giving responses, as if entire scenes from the past were being replayed in perfect detail. Some of the conversations were mundane, traders discussing routes and prices, travelers sharing stories around campfires, but others were more significant. The team recorded what appeared to be religious ceremonies, conducted in languages that predated known historical records, political discussions between leaders whose names didn't appear in any historical texts, and most intriguingly, technical conversations about engineering projects and astronomical observations that suggested a level of sophisticated knowledge that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. One particular conversation, recorded in what linguists later identified as a form of Proto-Egyptian, described the construction of a massive stone structure using techniques that modern engineers struggle to replicate. The speakers discussed moving blocks weighing hundreds of tons, using sound frequencies and harmonic resonance, methods that don't exist in any known historical record. But the most disturbing aspect of the crystal recordings was their temporal nature. The voices didn't just play back in chronological order, they seemed to respond to the presence of the research team. When Dr. Chen asked a question aloud, the crystals would sometimes play back an answer as if the ancient voices were somehow aware of the modern listeners and engaging in conversation across time. The phenomenon intensified the longer the team remained in the chamber. The crystals began playing back conversations in languages that the team members recognized, sometimes in their own voices, even though they had never spoken those words in the cave. It was as if the crystals were not just recording the past, but somehow accessing potential futures, playing back conversations that might happen or could happen under different circumstances. The Egyptian government quickly classified the discovery and restricted access to the site. Official reports describe the cave as a unique acoustic phenomenon of primarily geological interest, but leaked documents suggest that the implications were far more significant than publicly acknowledged. The crystals weren't just playing back random conversations, they seemed to be preserving specific types of information, particularly technical knowledge and historical events that weren't recorded in any other form. Researchers who studied the recordings before access was restricted reported finding references to historical events that predated known written records by thousands of years. Conversations about migrations, wars, and natural disasters that occurred before the rest of known civilizations. But more significantly, they found technical discussions about subjects that shouldn't have been understood in the ancient world: astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and even what appeared to be discussions about the nature of time itself. One recording, spoken in what appeared to be an unknown language, but somehow understood by all who heard it, described a great catastrophe that would silence the stones and still the voices. The speaker warned that knowledge was being lost, that the crystal chambers were failing, and that future generations would need to rediscover what was being forgotten. The site was sealed in 1997, officially due to structural instability. But some researchers believe the real reason was that the crystals had begun playing back conversations that were too sensitive or too dangerous to be heard. There were reports of the crystals broadcasting military communications, government discussions, and private conversations from the modern world, as if their recording capability wasn't limited to the past, but extended to the present as well. The technology behind the crystal recordings remains unexplained. No known natural process can account for the precise storage and playback of acoustic information over thousands of years. Some researchers have proposed that the crystals contain a form of quantum memory, able to store information at the molecular level and replay it under specific conditions. Others suggest that the formations are artificial, created by an advanced civilization that understood principles of information storage that we're only beginning to discover. But perhaps the most intriguing theory is that the crystals represent a form of temporal communication system, that ancient civilizations discovered how to encode information in mineral structures, creating a kind of time capsule that could be accessed by future generations. If true, it would mean that knowledge and conversations from the distant past are still available, waiting to be heard by those who know how to listen. The crystal chamber remains sealed, its location classified, its contents restricted to a handful of researchers who have been sworn to secrecy. But the recordings that were made during that brief window of access continue to be studied in private, analyzed by linguists, historians, and physicists who are trying to understand how voices from the past can speak to the present. What they've discovered is that human history may be far more complex and interconnected than we've ever imagined. That knowledge and conversation, once thought to be lost forever, may actually be preserved in the very stones beneath our feet, waiting for the right conditions to speak again. The crystals in the Sahara represent just one example of how the past might still be alive, still speaking, still trying to communicate with those who come after. The voices continue to echo in the sealed chamber, carrying conversations across centuries, preserving knowledge that was thought lost forever. And somewhere in those crystal formations, the past is still speaking, still teaching, still trying to bridge the gap between what was and what is, one conversation at a time. There's something beneath the ice sheets of Antarctica that no one talks about openly. Deep beneath the frozen wasteland, where temperatures plummet to minus 70 degrees, where the wind howls like a living thing across endless white, satellite scans have detected structures. Not natural formations, not random ice caves, but geometric patterns too precise to be accidents. Straight lines running for kilometers underground, perfect circles carved into bedrock, and chambers, massive hollowed out spaces that shouldn't exist. These aren't recent discoveries. The first anomalous readings date back to the 1970s, when military satellites conducting routine ice thickness surveys picked up something unusual. Dense, angular objects buried 2 miles beneath the surface. The readings were classified immediately. For decades, only a handful of researchers knew these structures existed. But now, as climate change accelerates ice melt and new ground-penetrating technology reveals more detail, the truth is becoming harder to hide. The structures aren't scattered randomly across the continent. They follow a pattern, a network, lines of perfectly straight tunnels connecting massive underground chambers, some as large as aircraft hangars. The engineering required to create such spaces would challenge even modern construction techniques, yet they exist beneath ice that's been solid for millions of years. And they're not natural. Natural caves don't form geometric patterns. Natural ice formations don't create straight-line tunnels spanning dozens of kilometers. In 2019, a joint research expedition from Norway and the United States managed to access one of the smaller chambers through a naturally occurring crevasse. What they found inside defied explanation. The walls were smooth, almost polished, covered in a thin layer of ice that had formed over something underneath. When they carefully scraped away the ice, they revealed symbols, not hieroglyphs, not any known writing system, but geometric patterns etched into what appeared to be metal. The metal itself was unidentifiable through standard analysis. It didn't match any known alloy, yet it had clearly been worked, shaped, placed there with intention. The expedition team documented everything they could before the crevasse began to shift, threatening to seal them inside. But their most disturbing discovery came as they prepared to leave. Using thermal imaging equipment, they detected heat signatures deeper in the chamber. Not just residual warmth from their equipment, but consistent rhythmic heat patterns emanating from behind one of the walls. Something was generating warmth down there. Something that had been generating warmth for a very long time. The official report classified the findings as inconclusive. Possible natural formation enhanced by unknown geological processes. But the unofficial conversations among the team members told a different story. They had found something that had been deliberately constructed, something that was still active, and something that was definitely not human in origin. Since then, access to the site has been restricted. The area is now designated as a protected research zone, closed to all but the most essential personnel. Satellite monitoring has been increased, but the data is no longer shared with civilian research institutions. Whatever lies beneath Antarctica's ice has become a matter of national security, but the structures aren't dormant. Recent seismic activity in the region doesn't match typical ice sheet movement. The vibrations are too regular, too rhythmic. They pulse in patterns that repeat every 47 minutes, like a heartbeat, like something breathing, and the thermal signatures are growing stronger. Whatever's down there is waking up. Local indigenous stories from the southern tip of South America speak of the frozen lands beyond the sea. Not Antarctica by name, but a place where the earth sleeps, where the old ones wait, where something vast and patient lies dreaming beneath the ice. These stories predate European contact by centuries. They predate any known human presence in Antarctica by millennia. Yet they describe the continent with uncanny accuracy, including details about what lies beneath the surface. The most unsettling theory among researchers is that these structures aren't ruins, they're facilities. Underground installations built by someone or something that understood the cycles of ice ages, that knew Antarctica would be frozen and uninhabitable for long periods, and that constructed these chambers to wait, to preserve something, to maintain something, until the ice began to melt and the surface world became accessible again. Recent satellite imagery shows new formations appearing as the ice retreats. Structures that were once buried under kilometers of ice are now visible from above. Geometric patterns are etched into the landscape, stone circles, linear arrangements that stretch for hundreds of kilometers, all of it following the same precise geometric principles found in the underground chambers. The timing is unsettling. As global temperatures rise and Antarctica's ice sheets retreat at unprecedented rates, these ancient structures are being revealed, not gradually, not randomly, but in a sequence that suggests planning. As if someone knew exactly when the ice would melt and designed these reveals to coincide with our technological ability to detect them. There's something else. The structures appear to be connected to similar anomalies in other remote locations. Ground-penetrating radar has detected comparable geometric patterns beneath the ice in Greenland, in the permafrost of Siberia, even in the deep ocean trenches where Ice Age sea levels once exposed dry land. A global network of underground installations, all following the same architectural principles, all activated by the same rhythmic pulses that originate from beneath Antarctica. The questions this raises are staggering. Who built these structures? When? And why are they becoming active now? Are they responding to climate change, or is climate change responding to them? Are we witnessing the awakening of something that has been dormant for millennia, waiting for the right conditions to emerge? The official scientific community remains silent on these questions. Research papers focus on ice thickness measurements and penguin populations. The truly significant discoveries are buried in classified reports, discussed only in closed sessions among government officials and military advisors. The public is told that Antarctica is a pristine wilderness, important only for climate research and wildlife protection. But beneath the ice, something stirs, something that has been waiting longer than human civilization has existed, something that knew we would eventually develop the technology to find it, and something that appears to be preparing for our arrival. The structures are expanding, new chambers are forming, connected by tunnels that extend toward the surface. The thermal signatures are growing stronger, more widespread, and the rhythmic pulses are accelerating. Whatever's down there isn't just waking up, it's getting ready, and as the ice continues to melt at an unprecedented rate, as global temperatures rise and sea levels threaten coastal cities worldwide, we're forced to confront an uncomfortable possibility. What if climate change isn't just a consequence of human activity? What if it's part of a larger cycle, one that was set in motion long before humans existed? What if the structures beneath Antarctica aren't just responding to our changing climate, but orchestrating it? The truth remains buried beneath kilometers of ice and layers of government secrecy. But the ice is melting. The structures are activating, and soon, very soon, we may discover that we're not alone on this planet. We never were. Something has been waiting beneath the ice, watching, planning, preparing for the day when the frozen barriers would melt away and the two worlds would meet again. The footprint that changes what we know about time itself. Deep beneath the shifting sands of a forgotten desert, where the sun burns everything to silence and the wind carries no memory, lies evidence that shouldn't exist. Not artifacts, not ruins, not the usual fragments of ancient civilizations we're accustomed to finding. This is something different, something that challenges the very timeline we've built our understanding of human history upon. It was discovered by accident, like so many mysteries that refuse to stay buried. A geological survey team was drilling core samples near the Sahara's edge, looking for groundwater reserves that might have existed thousands of years ago. Instead, at a depth that corresponded to sedimentary layers over 50,000 years old, they found something that made them stop work immediately and call in archaeologists. Preserved in what had once been soft mud, now hardened to stone, was a human footprint. Not the broad, primitive impression you might expect from early hominids, but something eerily modern. The arch was pronounced, The toes clearly defined, the heels struck the ground with the same mechanics as someone walking today. But this wasn't just any footprint. Next to it, pressed into the same ancient mud, was the clear impression of a shoe sole. Not a sandal, not wrapped animal hide, but something with defined treads, geometric patterns, and what appeared to be synthetic materials. The implications were staggering. According to everything we know about human development, shoes with complex sole patterns didn't exist 50,000 years ago. Modern humans were supposedly just beginning to develop sophisticated tool use and clothing. Advanced footwear, especially anything resembling contemporary shoe design, was tens of thousands of years in the future. The team worked in complete secrecy for months. They carefully excavated around the impression, taking detailed photographs and measurements. Carbon dating of the surrounding sediment confirmed what they feared. The print was authentic, undisturbed, and impossibly old. But it wasn't alone. As they expanded their search area, they found more impressions scattered across what had once been a shoreline. Some were barefoot, others showed evidence of different types of footwear. All of them displayed the same anatomical precision of modern humans. One discovery was particularly unsettling. A series of footprints appeared to show someone running, their stride, length, and foot placement consistent with fleeing from something. But these weren't the chaotic, panicked steps of someone escaping a predator. The gait was measured, purposeful, as if the person knew exactly where they were going and why they needed to get there quickly. Even more disturbing was what they found at the end of the running trail. The footprints simply stopped. Not at the edge of the preserved mud, not where the ancient shoreline would have met deeper water, but in the middle of what had been open ground. The person had been running and then vanished, leaving no trace of where they might have gone. The team brought in specialists from around the world, anthropologists, forensic investigators, even experts in ancient textiles tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The footwear impressions showed signs of manufacturing techniques that shouldn't have existed for millennia. Precise stitching patterns, uniform material thickness, even what appeared to be logos or decorative elements pressed into the sole design. One researcher, working late into the night with high-powered magnification equipment, made a discovery that changed everything. Within the heel impression of one of the shoe prints, barely visible even under intense lighting, was a partial symbol, not a random marking or natural formation, but something deliberate, geometric, almost like a manufacturer's mark. The design was unlike anything from known ancient cultures, but eerily similar to modern industrial branding. As news of the discovery began to leak, despite attempts to keep it classified, theories emerged that challenged fundamental assumptions about human history. Some suggested that advanced civilizations had risen and fallen multiple times, leaving only traces like these footprints behind. Others proposed that time itself might not be as linear as we assume, that somehow impressions from the future had been pressed into ancient mud. The most disturbing theory came from a physicist who had been brought in to examine the sediment layers. He suggested that the footprints might be evidence of temporal displacement, instances where people from different time periods had somehow occupied the same physical space. The running footprints, he argued, might have been someone trying to escape back to their own time before becoming permanently trapped in the past. But perhaps the most chilling discovery came from soil analysis around the prints. Mixed with the ancient sediment were microscopic traces of materials that didn't belong to any known geological period. Synthetic polymers, metallic alloys, even what appeared to be processed chemicals that wouldn't be invented for thousands of years. It was as if whoever had left these footprints had brought pieces of the future with them. The site was eventually sealed and classified. Official reports listed it as a geological anomaly, nothing more. The team members were reassigned to different projects, scattered across various institutions. Most signed agreements that prevented them from discussing their findings publicly. But the footprints remain, buried once again beneath the desert sand, waiting for someone brave enough to ask the right questions. The few images that survived the classification process show impressions so clear, so perfectly preserved, that they look like they were made yesterday. But the rock-hard sediment surrounding them tells a different story. These are messages from a time that shouldn't exist, left by people who walked the earth when humans were supposedly still learning to make fire. Local legends from the region speak of the Time Walkers, beings who appear in the desert during certain celestial alignments, walking between worlds, leaving traces of their passage for those who know how to look. The tribal elders say these footprints have been found before, always in places where time feels thin, where the past and future meet in ways that don't follow the rules we've written for ourselves. What makes this discovery so unsettling isn't just the age of the footprints or the advanced footwear they represent. It's the suggestion that our understanding of time itself might be fundamentally flawed, that the neat progression we've constructed from primitive to advanced, from past to future, might be an illusion we've created to make sense of a reality far more complex and fluid than we're prepared to accept. The footprint that changes what we know about time itself remains buried, but its implications echo through every assumption we've made about human history. Somewhere beneath the desert sand, preserved in stone that's older than civilization itself, is evidence that time might not be the straight line we thought it was. And if that's true, then everything we think we know about our past, our present, and our future might need to be rewritten. The crystal that grows in perfect spirals without any natural explanation, high in the Andes, where the air is thin and the silence feels like it has weight. There's a cave that local miners discovered by accident in 1987. They were following a silver vein that suddenly opened into a chamber unlike anything they'd seen before. The walls were lined with crystals, but not the rough, chaotic formations you'd expect from natural processes. These grew in perfect spirals, each one identical to the others, rising from the floor in mathematical precision. The miners, hardened men who had spent their lives underground, backed out of the chamber immediately. Something about the crystals felt wrong, too organized, too deliberate. They reported the find to the local authorities, but when scientists arrived to investigate, they found something that challenged everything they knew about crystal formation. Natural crystals grow according to their internal atomic structure, following patterns determined by the arrangement of molecules and the conditions in which they form. But these crystals defied those rules. They spiraled upward in perfect helixes, each turn exactly the same distance from the last, each point along the spiral identical in size and shape. It was as if someone had grown them according to a blueprint, following instructions that nature doesn't provide. The mathematical precision was breathtaking. Each spiral followed the golden ratio, that fundamental proportion found in nautilus shells and flower petals, but with a precision that organic forms rarely achieve. The spacing between each turn, the angle of the spiral, even the thickness of the crystal walls remained constant throughout the entire formation. It was a geometry made manifest in stone, but the real mystery wasn't just their shape. These crystals were growing, not slowly over geological time, but visibly, measurably, at a rate that shouldn't be possible. Time-lapse photography showed them extending upward at approximately 1 millimeter per day, maintaining their perfect spiral pattern as they grew. The chamber had no obvious source of the minerals needed for crystal formation, no flowing water, no chemical deposits, yet the crystals continued to expand. Even more puzzling was their composition. Standard analysis revealed them to be made primarily of quartz, but with trace elements that didn't match anything in the surrounding rock. The crystals contained isotopes that shouldn't exist in nature, arranged in patterns that suggested they were being constructed rather than grown. It was as if someone was manufacturing these formations using processes that operated beyond natural law. The acoustic properties of the chamber added another layer to the mystery. The spiraling crystals created a resonance effect that amplified certain frequencies while dampening others. When researchers spoke inside the chamber, their voices took on an otherworldly quality, becoming deeper, more resonant, as if the crystals were tuning the sound itself. Sensitive equipment detected subsonic vibrations emanating from the formations, a low-frequency hum that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the Earth's rotation. One team of researchers decided to test whether the crystals were somehow connected to external forces. They monitored the chamber during a solar eclipse, expecting to see changes in the formation's behavior. What they found was extraordinary. As the moon passed between the Earth and Sun, the crystals began to glow with a faint, internal light. The spiral pattern became more pronounced, and the growth rate increased dramatically. During the few minutes of totality, the crystals grew nearly a centimeter, maintaining their perfect proportions even as they expanded at an impossible rate. The phenomenon repeated during other celestial events, lunar eclipses, planetary alignments. Even the passage of certain comets seemed to trigger responses in the crystals. They would pulse with light, change their growth patterns, or emit different frequencies of sound. It was as if they were somehow tuned to cosmic events, responding to forces that operated on a scale far beyond the confines of their underground chamber. Attempts to remove samples from the chamber failed repeatedly. When researchers tried to chip off pieces of the crystals, their tools would malfunction, becoming dull or breaking despite being designed for much harder materials. Laser cutting equipment would shut down mysteriously when aimed at the formations. Even chemical analysis proved difficult, as the crystals seemed to resist any attempt to alter their structure. The few microscopic samples that were successfully obtained revealed even more puzzling characteristics. Under electron microscopy, the crystal structure showed patterns that resembled circuitry, with pathways and junctions that looked almost technological. The atomic arrangement suggested a level of organization that shouldn't occur naturally, as if the crystals were not just growing, but being programmed at the molecular level. Local shamans from the region claimed the crystals were sacred, that they had been growing in the chamber for thousands of years, serving as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. They spoke of ancient rituals performed in the chamber, where the spiraling formations would glow and sing, providing guidance to those who knew how to listen. According to their oral traditions, the crystals were not of this world, but had been planted by star beings as a gift to humanity, a tool for understanding the deeper patterns that govern reality. The chamber was eventually sealed and classified as a protected archaeological site, though the real reason for the restriction was the crystal's unexplained properties. The few scientists who had access to the site signed confidentiality agreements, and research was quietly discontinued. Official reports listed the formations as an unusual but natural geological phenomenon, nothing more. But the crystals continue to grow, deep beneath the Andes, spiraling upward in perfect mathematical precision, responding to celestial events in ways that science cannot explain. They remain a testament to the possibility that our understanding of natural processes is incomplete, that there are forces at work in the universe that operate according to rules we haven't yet discovered. The crystal that grows in perfect spirals without any natural explanation serves as a reminder that the world is far stranger and more mysterious than we've allowed ourselves to believe. The colossal stone circle that predates known civilization, hidden deep within the Ural Mountains, stands a place that shouldn't exist. Not another Stonehenge, not another ancient temple, but something older, more complex, and infinitely more mysterious. They call it the Archaeum Circle, though that name barely captures what researchers have found buried beneath centuries of Russian soil. Picture this: a massive stone formation, perfectly circular, with astronomical alignments so precise they rival modern observatories. Carbon dating places it at over 4,000 years old, but the mathematical precision suggests knowledge that supposedly didn't exist until thousands of years later. The stones themselves aren't just placed randomly. Each one sits at exact intervals, creating geometric patterns that mirror the golden ratio, celestial mechanics, and acoustic properties that modern engineers struggle to replicate. But here's where it gets strange. The circle wasn't built on flat ground. It was constructed on a hill that was artificially shaped, carved and molded to create the perfect foundation. Ground-penetrating radar shows layers of construction beneath the visible stones, suggesting this wasn't just a single project, but generations of building, rebuilding, and refining. Who had that kind of time? Who had that kind of knowledge? And why did they choose this remote location, far from any known trade routes or settlements? The acoustic properties alone are mind-bending. Stand in the center and whisper, and your voice carries clearly to the outer ring, but step just 3 feet in any direction, and the effect vanishes. Sound engineers have tried to explain it, but the stone placement required to create such precise acoustics would need computer modeling and advanced understanding of wave physics. This was supposedly built by Bronze Age peoples who didn't even have written language. Then there's the astronomical alignment. The stones don't just mark the solstices and equinoxes like most ancient sites. They track Venus, Mars, and the precession of the equinoxes, a 26,000-year cycle that requires centuries of careful observation to map. The builders knew about celestial mechanics that weren't officially discovered until Copernicus and Kepler. How is that possible? Local legends offer clues, but they're more unsettling than helpful. The indigenous Bashkir people have stories about the circle that go back generations, but they never claimed to have built it. Instead, they speak of the Star Watchers, a people who came from the south, built the circle, and then vanished when the sky changed. They say these Star Watchers could predict eclipses, floods, and even the rise and fall of civilizations by reading the stones. But here's the disturbing part. According to the legends, the Star Watchers didn't just observe the sky. They claimed to be waiting for something, watching for a sign that would tell them when to leave. Archaeological evidence suggests they were right to wait. The site was abandoned suddenly, around 1600 BCE, right around the time of massive climate changes across Europe and Asia. No signs of warfare, no evidence of disease or famine. The people just left, taking their knowledge with them. They left behind only the stones and a few artifacts that don't match any known culture from that time period. The artifacts are perhaps the most puzzling part. Bronze tools with metallurgy so advanced they contain trace elements that require temperatures modern forges struggle to reach. Pottery with glazes that shouldn't have existed for another 1,000 years. And carved symbols that appear to be star charts, but for constellations that don't match our current sky. Some researchers believe these charts show the night sky as it appeared thousands of years earlier, suggesting the builders had access to records spanning millennia. Recent excavations have uncovered something even more mysterious. Beneath the main circle, archaeologists found a series of chambers connected by tunnels. The chambers are perfectly round, carved from solid bedrock, and lined with a type of stone that's not found anywhere in the region. The walls are covered with symbols that spiral from floor to ceiling, creating patterns that seem to shift and change depending on the lighting. Some visitors report feeling dizzy or disoriented when they spend too long in these chambers, as if the symbols are designed to alter consciousness. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery is what's missing. There are no burials, no signs of habitation, no evidence that people actually lived at the site. The circle appears to have been used solely for whatever purpose it was designed for, then abandoned. It's as if the builders created something, used it, and then walked away when their work was done. Modern attempts to understand the site have been frustrated by technical failures. Ground-penetrating radar works until it reaches a certain depth, then the signals become scrambled. Satellite imagery shows the circle clearly, but thermal imaging picks up strange heat signatures that don't correspond to any visible structures. Even GPS becomes unreliable near the site, with coordinates shifting by several meters for no apparent reason. The Russian government has classified much of the research, citing the need to preserve the site from vandalism. But some researchers believe there's more to the story. They point to the fact that the area has been quietly restricted, with military checkpoints appearing on roads that lead to the circle. Officially, it's for archaeological protection. Unofficially, some wonder if they've found something that challenges our understanding of human history so fundamentally that it needs to be kept secret. What if the Arcane Circle wasn't just an ancient observatory, but something more? What if it was a kind of cosmic calendar designed to track not just celestial events, but something else entirely? The precision of the construction, the advanced knowledge required, and the sudden abandonment all point to a purpose we haven't yet understood. The Star Watchers, whoever they were, built something that was meant to last, meant to be found, and meant to tell us something about our past that we're not ready to hear. The stones remain, silent and patient, holding secrets that span millennia. They've outlasted empires, survived ice ages, and continue to baffle everyone who studies them. Perhaps that's the point. Perhaps the real message isn't in the alignments or the acoustics or the underground chambers. Perhaps it's in the reminder that human civilization is far older, far more complex, and far more mysterious than we've ever imagined. The crystal skull that changes its appearance in different lights. Deep in the restricted archives of a Central American museum, locked away from public view, sits an object that defies explanation. It's not displayed, not photographed for postcards, not mentioned in guidebooks. Most visitors never know it exists, but those who've seen it describe something that shouldn't be possible. A crystal skull that appears to be carved from a single piece of quartz, flawless and impossibly detailed, but with one unsettling property. It changes depending on who's looking at it and what light is shining on it. The skull first appeared in the 1920s, discovered by an explorer in the ruins of a Mayan temple. Nothing unusual about that. Crystal skulls have been found before, most proven to be modern fakes carved with steel tools. But this one was different. When examined under a microscope, there were no tool marks, no signs of modern manufacturing. The crystal itself was perfect, no fractures, no internal flaws, carved against the natural grain of the quartz in a way that should have shattered it. But the real mystery began when researchers started documenting it. Every photograph came out different. Under fluorescent lights, the skull appeared smooth and featureless. Under incandescent bulbs, intricate carvings became visible, symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. In sunlight, the skull became almost transparent, revealing what appeared to be a complex internal structure, like a three-dimensional map of some kind. The most disturbing discovery came when researchers realized the skull seemed to respond to the people viewing it. Different individuals would see completely different details. Some saw Mayan glyphs, others saw symbols that resembled Egyptian hieroglyphs, and a few reported seeing markings that didn't match any known writing system. It was as if the skull was showing each person something specific, something personal. Dr. Elna Vasquez, a crystallographer who studied the skull in the 1980s, described her experience. I spent weeks examining it, and every session was different. One day I would see smooth crystal, the next day elaborate carvings would appear. But the strangest part was that the skull seemed to know what I was looking for. When I was researching Mayan astronomy, I would see star charts. When I was studying their calendar systems, I would see numerical sequences. It was as if the skull was responding to my thoughts. The skull's optical properties became even more bizarre when researchers discovered it could somehow bend light in ways that violated basic physics. Light entering from one side would exit from unexpected angles, creating the illusion that the skull was larger on the inside than the outside. Some researchers reported seeing what appeared to be moving images within the crystal, like a primitive form of holographic display. But the most unsettling aspect was the skull's effect on people who spent extended time with it. Several researchers reported vivid dreams after examining the skull, dreams that seemed to show ancient civilizations, advanced technologies, and cosmic events. Some described seeing the construction of massive stone monuments. Others witnessed what appeared to be contact between humans and beings from elsewhere. The dreams were so vivid and consistent that some researchers began to wonder if the skull was somehow transmitting information directly into their minds. The skull's history became even more mysterious when researchers tried to trace its origins. The temple where it was found showed no signs of crystal working, no tools capable of creating such precise carvings. Carbon dating of organic materials found with the skull suggested it was ancient, but the crystal itself couldn't be dated. More disturbing, when researchers compared it to other crystal skulls in museums around the world, they found subtle similarities that suggested they might all be part of a larger set, each one slightly different, but clearly created by the same unknown technology. Local legends about the skull were even more unsettling. The Maya who lived near the discovery site spoke of 13 crystal skulls, each one containing the knowledge of a different advanced civilization. They said the skulls were created not by humans, but by beings who came from the stars, left as a kind of library for future generations to discover when they were ready. According to the legends, when all 13 skulls were brought together, they would reveal secrets about humanity's true origins and its cosmic destiny. The skull was eventually removed from display and placed in restricted storage after several incidents that museum officials refused to discuss publicly. Visitors had reported feeling dizzy, disoriented, or experiencing sudden flashes of impossible memories while viewing it. Some claimed to have brief visions of other worlds, other times, other realities. The museum's insurance company eventually required that the skull be removed from public access, citing liability concerns. Recent attempts to study the skull with modern technology have been frustrated by its unusual properties. CT scans produce images that seem to show internal structures that change between scans. Spectroscopic analysis reveals mineral compositions that shift depending on the testing conditions. Even basic photography has become unreliable, with digital cameras producing images that don't match what the human eye sees. The skull remains in its climate-controlled storage, occasionally examined by researchers who sign extensive non-disclosure agreements. Those who've seen it recently report that it seems to be becoming more active, more responsive. The internal images are clearer, the symbolic carvings more detailed. It's as if the skull is waking up, preparing for something. But what that something might be, no one knows. Perhaps the crystal skull is exactly what the legends claim, a repository of knowledge from a civilization far more advanced than our own, waiting for the right moment to reveal its secrets. Perhaps it's a communication device, still functional after thousands of years, trying to send a message we're not yet equipped to receive. Or perhaps it's something else entirely, something that challenges our understanding of reality itself. The skull waits in its darkened storage room, patient and eternal, holding secrets that span millennia. It's seen civilizations rise and fall, witnessed the march of human progress, and continues to offer glimpses of truths we're not yet ready to understand. And perhaps that's the point. Perhaps some knowledge is too dangerous, too transformative to be revealed all at once. Perhaps the skull is waiting for us to evolve, to become ready for the cosmic truths it contains. Until then, it remains what it has always been, a mirror that reflects not just light, but the deepest mysteries of human existence, showing each viewer exactly what they need to see when they're ready to see it. The chamber that lies outside of space and time, hidden beneath the ancient monastery of San Benedetto in the Italian Alps, where the air itself feels thick with centuries of silence. There exists a room that shouldn't be possible to enter it. You must ascend through a narrow stone corridor that spirals downward for what seems like miles. But when you finally emerge, you find yourself in a circular chamber carved from black granite, so smooth it appears to have been polished by time itself. But this isn't what makes the chamber impossible. It's what happens to time when you're inside it. Visitors describe the same disturbing experience. Their watches stop, not broken, just frozen, as if time itself has decided to pause. Digital clocks, malfunction analog timepieces cease their ticking, and even atomic chronometers, the most precise instruments ever created by human hands, fail to register the passage of seconds, minutes, hours. When you enter the chamber, you could swear you've been inside for only a few minutes. Yet when you emerge, hours have passed in the outside world, or sometimes the opposite happens. You feel as though you've been trapped inside for days, pacing the smooth walls, searching for an exit that you're certain you just entered through. But when you finally find your way out, only minutes have elapsed. The chamber was discovered in 1954 during renovations of the monastery's foundation. Workers drilling through what they thought was solid bedrock found an empty space beneath their equipment, detected a hollow void, perfectly circular, about 20 feet in diameter. The abbot initially forbade anyone from entering, claiming it was probably just a natural cave formation, but curiosity won, and a small team descended. What they found defied explanation. The chamber was clearly artificial. The walls were inscribed with symbols that resembled no known language. The floor was divided into concentric circles, each one carved with mathematical precision, and at the center of the room stood a single stone pedestal topped with what appeared to be a crystal sphere, but it was the effects on time that truly unnerved them. The first monk to enter spent what felt like an hour inside examining the walls and the mysterious sphere. When he called up to his brothers, they rushed to help him, thinking he'd been trapped for nearly 6 hours. His watch had stopped at exactly the moment he crossed the threshold. The monastery's bells, which had chimed every hour for over 8 centuries, fell silent while he was inside, as if the chamber existed in a pocket outside the normal flow of time. Over the decades, a handful of researchers have been permitted to study the chamber. Each has reported the same temporal anomalies, but none have been able to explain them. The symbols on the walls remain undeciphered, though some bear an unsettling resemblance to mathematical equations describing space-time curvature concepts that wouldn't be formally understood until Einstein's theories emerged centuries after the chamber was sealed. The crystal sphere at the center appears to be made of no known material. It's perfectly transparent, yet somehow seems to bend light around it, creating the illusion that you're looking at it from multiple angles. Simultaneously, geologists have confirmed that the chamber is far older than the monastery above it. Carbon dating of organic materials found in the walls suggests it was sealed over 2,000 years ago. Yet the precision of the carving and the mathematical sophistication of the symbols suggest a level of knowledge that shouldn't have existed in ancient times. The chamber shows no signs of tool marks, no chisel scratches, no evidence of how it was carved from solid granite. The walls are so smooth They appear to have been formed rather than cut, as if someone had shaped the stone like clay while it was still soft. But perhaps most disturbing are the reports from those who've spent extended time inside the chamber. Several describe experiencing what they call temporal echoes, glimpses of the chamber at different points in history. They've seen robed figures performing rituals around the central sphere, witnessed the chamber when it was new and filled with strange equipment, and most unnervingly, some have reported seeing themselves from different time periods as if past and future versions of their visits were somehow overlapping in the same space. The monastery's records hint at the chamber's original purpose. Ancient documents, written in Latin, speak of a place where time bends, where the past and future converge, and where knowledge from distant ages was preserved. The monks who built the monastery above it claimed they were guided to the location by visions of a sacred chamber buried beneath the earth. They believed it was a gift from God, a place where mortal minds could glimpse eternity. But as the centuries passed, the chamber's effects began to disturb rather than inspire. By the 14th century, the chamber had been sealed. The official records state it was closed for safety reasons, but surviving letters between abbots tell a different story. They speak of monks who entered the chamber and returned changed, claiming to have seen the end of the world or the beginning of creation. Some never returned at all. Their voices could be heard from within the chamber long after they should have run out of air, as if they had become trapped in a temporal loop, unable to find their way back to the present. Modern physicists who've studied the chamber theorize it might be a natural phenomenon, a place where the Earth's magnetic field creates unusual effects on atomic clocks and human perception. But this explanation fails to account for the chamber's artificial construction or the sophistication of the symbols carved into its walls. Others suggest it might be evidence of a lost civilization, one that understood the nature of time in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. The chamber remains sealed today. Access is restricted to a small number of researchers who must undergo extensive psychological evaluation before being permitted to enter. Those who have experienced it describe feeling disconnected from linear time, as if they've glimpsed something fundamental about the nature of reality that human minds weren't meant to understand. Some report that after leaving the chamber, they continue to experience temporal anomalies, dreams that feel more real than waking life, memories of events that haven't happened yet, and the persistent feeling that time is not the constant, reliable force we believe it to be. The monastery continues to stand above the chamber. Its bells now chime again, marking the hours as they have for centuries. But those who know of the chamber below can't help but wonder if time itself is as solid as we believe, if somewhere beneath our feet, in a room carved from black granite, time pools and eddies like water, creating pockets where past, present, and future become one. And perhaps that's the most unsettling thought of all that time. The one thing we consider absolutely reliable might be nothing more than an illusion, and in certain places, under certain conditions, that illusion breaks down, revealing something far stranger underneath the compass that always points to the same location. No matter where you are in the world, there exists a compass that defies every law of magnetism and navigation ever discovered. It's not housed in a museum or locked away in a government facility. Instead, it sits quietly on the desk of a retired cartographer in a small town in Montana, where it continues to point steadfastly toward the same location regardless of where it's taken on Earth. The compass was discovered in 1987 in the estate sale of a deceased explorer named Thomas Meridian, who had spent his life mapping remote regions of the world. At first glance, the compass appears ordinary: brass casing, glass face, and a needle that seems to be made of some kind of dark metal, but when you pick it up and watch the needle, you realize something is wrong. Instead of pointing north, it points in a direction that makes no sense. And when you carry it to another location, across town, to another state, to another continent, the needle never wavers. It always points to the same spot on Earth with unwavering determination. The current owner, a cartographer named Helena Marsh, first noticed the compass's strange behavior when she purchased it along with a collection of antique maps. She thought it was simply broken until she began testing it systematically. She carried it from Montana to California, to New York, to London, to Tokyo, and in every location, the needle pointed in the exact same direction. When she calculated the angles and distances, she realized the compass was pointing to a specific coordinate in the middle of the Sahara Desert, a location so remote it doesn't appear on most maps. Driven by curiosity, Helena organized an expedition to the coordinates. The compass indicated what she found there. Asta changed everything about her understanding of the world buried beneath 3 feet of sand. In an area that showed no signs of human habitation was a perfectly circular metal disc about 2 feet in diameter, made of the same dark metal as the compass needle. The disc was covered in symbols that resembled no known language, and when Helena placed the compass on top of it, the needle began to spin wildly before settling into a new position, pointing toward a different location. Entirely, Helena realized she had discovered something unprecedented. The compass wasn't just pointing to a random location, it was pointing to a network of buried objects scattered across the globe. She spent the next decade following the compass's guidance, discovering similar discs buried in remote locations around the world. Each one caused the compass to redirect to the next location as if it were following a predetermined sequence in the Amazon rainforest beneath the ice of Antarctica, in the depths of the Gobi Desert. The compass led her to disc after disc, each one precisely placed, each one covered in the same undecipherable symbols. But the discs weren't just markers, they were clearly technological. Despite their ancient appearance, they generated subtle electromagnetic fields that could be detected with sensitive equipment. They seemed to be made of a material that didn't match any known element on Earth, and most mysteriously, they appeared to be communicating with each other when Helena activated one disc using a sequence of touches to the symbols. The others around the world would respond with their own electromagnetic pulses, as if they were part of a vast global network. The implications were staggering. Someone or something had placed these objects around the world in a precise pattern, creating a network that spanned continents and oceans. But who and when the discs showed signs of extreme age, yet their technology was far beyond anything humans had ever developed. They seemed to be monitoring or measuring something about the Earth itself, recording data that was then transmitted between the nodes of the network. Helena's discovery attracted the attention of various government agencies and private organizations who wanted to study the compass and the disk network. But before she could share her complete findings, she disappeared. Her house was found empty, Her research notes were gone, and the compass had vanished with her. The only trace of her work was a single letter sent to a colleague before she disappeared in it. She wrote that she had discovered something that changed everything about human history and that she feared for her safety. The letter contained coordinates to one final location, a place the compass had pointed to after she had activated all the disks she had found. Helena believed this location was the center of the network, the place where all the data was being collected and processed. She warned that what she had discovered was not meant for human eyes and that some knowledge was too dangerous to pursue, but she also included a hand-drawn map showing the approximate locations of all the disks she had found, as if she wanted others to continue her work. Since Helena's disappearance, several independent researchers have attempted to locate the disks using her map. Some have reported finding circular depressions in the sand or soil where the disks should have been, as if they had been removed. Others claim to have found the disks exactly where Helena indicated, but describe them as inert, no longer generating electromagnetic fields, no longer responding to touch. One researcher reported that when he found a disk, it crumbled to dust the moment he touched it, as if it had been waiting for decades to decompose. The compass itself has never been found. Some believe it's hidden in a government facility. Others think it was destroyed to prevent anyone from completing Helena's work. But there are rumors whispered in certain circles that the compass occasionally appears in the hands of other explorers, always leading them to the same network of buried objects, always following the same sequence, always pointing toward the same ultimate destination. What makes Helena's story even more compelling is that she wasn't the first to discover this network. Ancient texts from various cultures describe similar objects buried in the earth, sacred disks that fell from the sky or were left by the gods. The Hopi people speak of metal circles that sing to each other across great distances. Tibetan monks have legends of stone wheels that point the way to hidden wisdom. Even medieval European texts mention compass-like devices that don't point north, but towards something far more important. If Helena was right, if there truly is a global network of ancient objects communicating with each other and collecting data about our planet, then the compass that always points to the same location might be the key to understanding something fundamental about Earth's history and our place in it. But it also raises disturbing questions about who created this network and why they felt the need to monitor our world. With such precision, the compass remains lost, Helena's fate remains unknown, and the network of disks continues to operate in secret, hidden beneath the surface of our world, pointing toward answers we may not be ready to discover. But somewhere in the vast expanse of human curiosity, someone else will eventually pick up the trail and follow the compass to its ultimate destination. Whatever that might be, the manuscript that writes itself in the basement of the Prague National Library, beneath floors of catalogued books and forgotten texts, sits a document that has baffled scholars for over a century. It's written on parchment that appears to be medieval in origin, bound in leather that shows signs of extreme age. But the text inside continues to grow. New words appear on previously blank pages. New chapters manifest overnight, and the handwriting, though consistent throughout, looks like no script any paleographer has ever encountered. The manuscript was discovered in 1898 in the estate of a deceased alchemist named Victor Kozlov, who who had spent his life collecting occult texts and forbidden knowledge when librarians first examined the manuscript. They found it contained approximately 200 pages of dense text written in what appeared to be Latin, but with unusual grammatical structures and vocabulary that didn't match any known dialect. The content seemed to be a mixture of historical accounts, philosophical treatises, and prophetic visions describing events that spanned centuries. But when they returned to study it more carefully, they noticed something impossible. The manuscript had grown. It now contained pages that hadn't been there before, pages that appeared to be written in the same hand using the same ink. But describing events that had occurred after the manuscript was supposedly written. Dr. Anna Novikova, a specialist in medieval manuscripts, was assigned to study the document. She initially assumed the new pages were forgeries added by someone with access to the library's archives, but detailed analysis proved otherwise. The parchment was identical to the original pages. The ink matched perfectly, and the handwriting was indistinguishable from the rest of the text. Most importantly, the binding showed no signs of having been opened or altered. The new pages seemed to have materialized within the sealed manuscript. Over the following months, Anna documented the manuscript's growth. New text appeared regularly, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, but always during the night. When the library was closed and secured, the content of the new pages was even more disturbing than the original text. They contained detailed accounts of recent historical events, written as if by someone who had witnessed them. First-hand descriptions of World War I were followed by predictions of World War II, which came true with startling accuracy. The manuscript described political upheavals, social changes, and technological developments with a precision that suggested either incredible foresight or impossible knowledge. The handwriting itself defied explanation. Calligraphy experts confirmed it was consistent throughout the manuscript, but it didn't match any known script from any culture or time period. The letters were formed in a way that suggested the writer was ambidextrous, using both hands simultaneously to create perfectly symmetrical characters. Chemical analysis of the ink revealed a composition that included materials that's not available in medieval times, yet carbon dating of the parchment consistently placed it in the 13th century. As Anna continued her research, she began to notice patterns in the manuscript's growth. The new text didn't appear randomly. Instead, it seemed to respond to world events. Major historical moments would be followed within days by new pages, describing them often with details that weren't yet public knowledge. The manuscript described the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Before the newspapers reported, it predicted the stock market crash of 1929, with specific dates and figures, and contained detailed accounts of secret political meetings that wouldn't be revealed to historians until decades later. But the most unsettling aspect of the manuscript was its apparent awareness of being observed. Anna found references to herself in the text, descriptions of her research methods, her personal life, even her thoughts about the manuscript. As she studied it, the text seemed to be watching her as she watched it, creating a feedback loop between observer and observed that challenged basic assumptions about the nature of written documents. The manuscript also began to respond to questions. Anna would write queries in the margins, asking about specific historical events or future predictions, and within days, New text would appear providing detailed answers, but not in the way she expected. Instead of direct responses, the manuscript would weave the answers into longer narratives that seemed to be part of a larger story, a story that encompassed all of human history from the perspective of someone or something that existed outside normal time. Government intelligence agencies eventually became interested in the manuscript, recognizing its potential value for predicting future events. But when they attempted to study it, the manuscript went dormant. No new text appeared for months. The existing pages remained unchanged, as if the document was refusing to cooperate with official scrutiny. Only when Anna resumed her private research did the manuscript begin growing again, suggesting it had developed a preference for certain types of readers. The content of the manuscript grew increasingly philosophical as it expanded beyond historical accounts to include discussions of the nature of time, consciousness, and reality. It described human civilization as part of a larger pattern that repeated across different worlds and dimensions. The text suggested that history wasn't linear, but cyclical, with the same events playing out in slightly different forms across infinite variations of existence. Anna's research was cut short when she disappeared from the library one evening. Her personal effects were found at her desk, but she was never seen again. The manuscript was immediately sealed, and access was restricted to a small group of authorized researchers. But even under tight security, the document continued to grow. New pages appeared describing Anna's disappearance and the events that followed, as if the manuscript had absorbed her perspective and was now writing from her point of view. The current status of the manuscript remains classified, but rumors persist that it continues to grow, that it has predicted every major world event of the past century with perfect accuracy, and that it contains knowledge about the future that governments consider too dangerous to reveal. Some researchers believe the manuscript is connected to the same network of ancient objects that Helena Marsh discovered with her compass, that it's part of a larger system designed to monitor and record human history. Others think the manuscript is evidence of time travel or parallel dimensions, a document that exists simultaneously in multiple time periods, allowing it to record events from past, present, and future. The handwriting that matches no known script might belong to someone who exists outside normal human experience, someone who can observe history from a perspective that transcends individual lifetimes. Whatever the truth, the manuscript continues to write itself, adding new chapters to the story of human civilization, whether it's recording events as they happen or predicting what's to come, remains unclear. But the fact that it continues to grow suggests that our story is far from over, and that someone or something is still watching, still writing, still documenting every moment of our existence. In a text that spans centuries and shows no signs of ending, the machine that hears tomorrow deep in the mountains of Tibet, where the air is thin and the silence stretches for miles, there stands a structure that looks like a radio antenna, but points not toward the sky, but toward time itself, built into the side of a cliff, at an altitude where few humans can survive for long. The device appears to be constructed from materials that don't exist in any known periodic table, yet it has been receiving signals for over 70 years. Signals that arrive exactly 24 hours before the events they describe actually happen. The device was discovered in 1942 by a British expedition mapping uncharted regions of the Himalayas. They found it partially buried in an avalanche site where it had apparently been hidden for decades or possibly centuries. The structure consisted of a series of crystalline rods arranged in a complex geometric pattern connected by what appeared to be fiber optic cables made from an unknown translucent material. The entire assembly was powered by no visible energy source, yet it hummed with a constant low-frequency vibration that could be felt in the bones of anyone who approached it. Initially, the expedition members thought they had found the remains of an advanced military installation, perhaps a secret Nazi or Soviet project. But when they examined the construction more closely, they realized the technology was far beyond anything that existed in 1952. The materials were harder than diamond, yet flexible like rubber. The connections were seamless, as if the entire structure had been grown rather than assembled, and the device was clearly operational, displaying readings on surfaces that functioned like screens but were made of solid crystal. The first signal they recorded was a series of tones and pulses that seemed random until someone realized they matched the rhythm of Morse code when translated. The message was simple but impossible. It described a blizzard that would hit their exact location the following day, with specific details about wind speed, temperature, and duration. The expedition members were skeptical until the predicted storm arrived exactly as described, with conditions that matched the transmission perfectly over the following weeks. The device continued to receive and transmit signals, each one describing events that would occur exactly 24 hours later: weather patterns, political announcements, natural disasters, even personal conversations between expedition members that hadn't happened yet. The accuracy was perfect. Not a single prediction failed to come true, which raised disturbing questions about the nature of time and causality. The expedition's radio operator, a man named James Thornton, began documenting the transmissions. Systematically, he found that the device wasn't just receiving random future events, but seemed to be tuned to specific types of occurrences: major historical moments, natural disasters, and what he described as temporal anomalies, events that seemed to exist outside normal causality. The device appeared to be monitoring the future for disruptions in the flow of time itself. When the expedition returned to London, they brought extensive documentation of the device's transmissions, but their reports were classified immediately. The official explanation was that they had discovered an advanced Soviet listening post, but those who had been present knew the truth. The device was receiving information from tomorrow, and no human technology could explain how a second expedition was organized in 1954, this time with scientists and military personnel. But when they reached the coordinates, the device had changed. It was no longer receiving signals from 24 hours in the future. Instead, it was broadcasting them. The transmissions were going out into space, toward a destination that couldn't be determined, but the content had also changed. Instead of describing earthly events, the signals now contained mathematical equations that described the structure of space-time itself just a bit chin. A physicist on the second expedition recognized some of the equations as relating to theoretical work on time travel that wouldn't be published until decades later. The device seemed to be sending technical specifications for technologies that didn't yet exist, blueprints for machines that could manipulate time and space in ways that challenged everything science understood about the universe. The device's behavior became increasingly erratic over the following years. Sometimes it would go silent for months, then suddenly burst into activity, transmitting thousands of signals in a matter of hours. The content grew more complex, and more disturbing descriptions of alternate timelines, warnings about paradoxes created by time travel, and detailed accounts of civilizations that had discovered and misused temporal technology. In 1967, the device began receiving signals from multiple time periods, simultaneously messages from hours, days, weeks, and even years in the future, all arriving at the same moment, creating a cacophony of temporal information that drove several researchers to mental breakdowns. The overlapping timelines described in the transmissions suggested that time itself was becoming unstable, that something was causing the normal flow of causality to break down. The final recorded transmission from the device was received in 1971. It was a single message repeated over and over in every language known to humanity, warning that the machine itself was the cause of the temporal instability, that by listening to tomorrow, it had created a feedback loop that was gradually erasing the future. The message ended with coordinates to locations around the world where similar devices could be found, and a warning that they all needed to be destroyed before they unraveled time itself. The device was dismantled in 1972. Its components were separated and hidden in secure facilities around the world, but the damage may have already been done. Physicists have noted increasing anomalies in the behavior of atomic clocks, time dilation effects that don't match relativistic predictions, and reports of temporal displacement events that suggest the fabric of space-time itself is becoming unstable. Some researchers believe the device was built by a future civilization that had mastered time travel and was using it to monitor and prevent paradoxes. Others think it was created by the same ancient network that left the compass and the buried disks, a system designed to maintain the stability of time itself. But the most disturbing possibility is that the device was a warning that by developing the ability to see into the future, humanity had already begun to destroy the very concept of tomorrow. The locations mentioned in the final transmission have never been fully investigated, but satellite imagery has identified unusual structures at several of the coordinate structures that appear to be growing or changing over time, as if they exist in a state of temporal flux. Whether these represent other time monitoring devices or something even more dangerous remains unknown. The fragments of the original device are still stored in secure facilities around the world, but they continue to exhibit unusual properties: metal that ages backwards, crystal that displays images of events that haven't happened yet, and circuits that seem to operate on principles that physics cannot explain. The machine that could hear tomorrow may have been silenced, but its legacy continues to ripple through time, leaving questions about the nature of causality that may never be answered. Exploring extraordinary archaeological enigmas reveals that our understanding of human history may be far more limited than imagined. Precise astronomical alignments and inexplicable artifacts challenge our assumptions and suggest advanced knowledge, technology, or contact with otherworldly intelligences long before recorded history. What secrets remain buried, and what truths about consciousness, time, and our place in the universe await discovery?